Howdy, y'all. It's Curious Raven on Wednesday with some heartfelt ghost stories of loved ones that passed away coming back to visit us. I hope y'all enjoy. Number 1. Hi, all. I'm not a great storyteller, but I will try my best. For my short but sweet story, we need to go back to 2011. I was 18. I am now 30, so it's been quite a few years. Me and my now ex-girlfriend decided one day to have a psychic that we saw on Facebook come to our house and share a reading with us. I was very skeptical, but my ex wasn't, so I decided to entertain it. The lady was everything you'd imagine a psychic to be. She had long gray hair, wore clothes of a hippie nature, and believe it or not, she even came with an assistant of hers. She came in our house and took a seat in the front room. It began by saying she wanted to do both mine and my ex's readings separately. So I went into the back garden and had a cigarette with her assistant. He was an alright dude. My ex had her reading and came out in tears, and she couldn't believe some of the stuff the lady had said. But I still wasn't fully convinced. And it was my turn. Went straight and sat down, and she immediately told me not to be so skeptical. Something I hadn't even told her or her assistant. Proceeded to tell me my granddad was present and called him by his first name, Michael, and said he was concerned about my back tire on my motorcycle. My motorcycle was at my mom's house 7 miles away. Continued to tell me other things that she literally had no way of knowing, like, for example, an inside joke between me and my ex, and she said within the year we would go from 2 to 3. My ex got pregnant the following year. She finished, and I went home, and me and my ex was just gobsmacked. And me, the skeptic, I was speechless. Then I remembered that she said my granddad had said about my back tire on my motorcycle. The next day, I get over to my mom's house, go into the garage, and right in front of me is my motorcycle with a puncture in its back tire. Goosebumps activated. Been a believer ever since. The reason I decided to share this story to you today is because I've spent the last couple of days reading through this subreddit, and it motivated me to share. I know sometimes psychics get stick in the media, etc. For me, this was real as seeing the real thing. Number 2. My best friend passed away 1 year ago, this last February 19th. She was only 36, effervescent and salty. She was fine one day, the next found out she had a brain tumor, and a year later she was gone. I hate that she has left. I'm sad my son won't know her laugh. I'm still devastated by her loss, and I'm not sure I'll ever recover. She had a ha-ha sense of humor. She found mild inconvenience amusing, but would move heaven and earth if you needed her. The first time I realized she was with me was during a fairly devastating day at work. I don't have a difficult job, but it can be emotionally heavy and repetitive. I went to my car for my break and turned on the radio and started scrolling through my phone. That song came on that everyone hates. I only say that because I've never met anyone who likes it. You cut out a piece of me and now I bleed internally. Ugh, just awful. Ugh, I hate this song. And immediately, the dial shifted to static. Not to the next station, not to the next signal, just static. To the very next number, I was listening to 100.7, and it was now 100.8. I looked at my steering wheel. I pressed the buttons on the surface to see which button would make the dial move. Only one digit. There wasn't one. That was the first time. There are other things, like my toddler son having random conversations with the wall, but the most obvious is the earring game. I've since realized that there's this game she wants to play when she wants to show me something or wants me to pay attention to something. My right earring will fall out. It could be a hoop, a stud, a post with a back, a chandelier on a wire, whatever. I don't designate my earrings left and right. I just put them on. But some days, especially recently, my right earring will just fall off. If it had a back, it's either still stuck to my ear or on the ground by my foot. But when I go down to get the earring, it sort of became a joke in my office because one day, on my way back in from being outside, someone noticed my earring was gone. I went back and found it and didn't really think much of it until it happened again with a different pair. I made a joke about how I must have had a ghost tugging on my ear, and yet it's happened a half a dozen times since with 4 other styles. Not sure what she's showing me, but I always get some good clarity in those moments. I don't know if it means anything, if it is anything, or if I just miss my friend. I like to think it's her way of pulling my ear to remind me that I have better things to do, or to complain less, or just to let me know she's not so far away. So, I put on earrings every day hoping to feel one fall away from me, just so I can say thanks to her for always keeping me company. Number 3. When I was 7 years old, my older cousin William was killed in a car accident. He was 11 years old. This happened in 1977. Fast forward 45 plus years, I had a dream I had to go deliver a piece of furniture to my aunt's house. When I arrived, my uncle and my other cousin Jimmy and another male I didn't recognize were in the kitchen making tacos. They invited me in for dinner. As we sat at the table eating, I was talking to this other guy that I didn't recognize. He looked very familiar, but I couldn't place him. After dinner, he proceeded to walk outside and help me unload the furniture. He was very nice, and I felt very comfortable with him. Just before I woke up from my dream, it hit me. That was my cousin William. I was very excited, and just as I woke up, I said out loud, "That's my cousin William." I'm talking to my mother a couple hours later. I told her all about the dream. She looked at me with a shocked look on her face and calmly said, "Today is his birthday." I was floored. I have never had a dream with him in it, and I had no idea when his birthday was. I considered it a visit, and this isn't even close to the first time this has happened to me. But it was visits from other friends and family who have passed away. It happens pretty often, but this one blew me away. Just thought I'd share and read through the comments to see what everyone had to say. Thank you. Number 4. Background. My dad lives in a typical suburban home in a 55 plus community. His house is probably 30 to 40 years old. 4 years ago, my dad's girlfriend, with whom he lived, died in the home after a battle with cancer. In the past few weeks, my father has reported several strange things happening. He saw an apparition in a gown walk through his dining room one evening while he was in the adjacent room watching TV. A very large piece of art fell off its wall. It had been hanging there for years without incident. Around 3 a.m. one day, he was awoken by a very large bang inside the home in the living room. Around the same time, on another day, he was awoken to the sound of a penny falling onto the hardwood floor next to his bed. He said the penny was not on his nightstand or anywhere he could recall. And if it was on the nightstand, it certainly wasn't on the edge where it could have fallen off so easily. What do you think is going on? What sorts of things can he do to see if it's really a ghost? Perhaps of his deceased girlfriend. Number 5. Months ago, before moving to my new home, I began to wake up during the night and feel as if I was being watched. My wife miscarried our first kid. He was our first son, and I was shattered when it happened. Well, one night I woke up, not really sure what time it was. Wife was asleep and all the kids were sleeping. I check on them periodically through the night because, as a father, I like to know my kids are safe and sleeping peacefully. I know my son was in the living room. He gets nightmares, and I'll run in there and assure him I'm there. However, the night I woke up, I faced the wall. I felt this presence. I felt like I was being watched. I sit up instinctively and see the silhouette of what I thought was my son standing in the doorway. Hey, buddy, you okay? Have a nightmare? No answer. I saw the blonde hair and a smile, and what dim light came from the television that was on in the living room. I began to get out of bed, and what I thought was my son dove around the doorframe. I walk out my room and see my son sound asleep. Buddy? My heart starts racing now as I approach my son and check to make sure he's sound asleep and not trying to fool me. Undoubtedly asleep. I had no other sons then. I began to look around the house, but the image of my son in the doorway kept replaying in my head. What if it was my deceased son? Was he always watching? Nothing like this has happened since, but I can't shake the possibility that if it was him, I felt so broken. Number 6. Growing up, I've always had a love for video games. Coming from a rather not so wealthy, not so poor, my parents weren't able to get me the system I truly wanted. The system was the Xbox 360. All of my friends had one, and I wanted one for myself. My parents wanted to buy me one, but it was not on their budget. What did I do? I saved any little money I could, and finally, after my 11th birthday, I was able to buy myself one. The Xbox was located downstairs of my parents' house. My mom always gave me a time to shut it off and go to bed upstairs. The stairs go up the majority of the steps and makes a turn with a few more steps till you reach the second floor. Just like any other night, I was playing Xbox and my bedtime had came upon. I turned the Xbox and TV off along with all the lights downstairs. As I worked to make my way upstairs, I turned the upstairs light on in the middle of the room. I walked up the majority of the stairs and made the turn to the middle room. As I turned, I seen my mom in a white gown with a gentle glow to her, as she never turned to say anything to me. She made her way into my sister's room, where all the lights are off. No night lights, no TV, nothing. It was a routine to hug and kiss my mom goodnight, as we were never promised tomorrow. I walk into the darkness of my sister's room to find no one in there. I turn the lights on in case my eyes were playing tricks on me, but they in fact were not. Neither my sister or my mom were in there. I quickly turned the lights off and ran to my parents' room to find my father, mother, sister all to be found. They were all giggling and joking around. I, on the other hand, had no words. Questions to how my mom got there so fast and changed her clothes and why she hadn't said anything to me. Them being dumbfounded by these questions had nothing to say, but I was seeing things and they were in my parents' room the entire time. The next day, I was shown a picture of my deceased aunt. She died of cancer before I was born. Until that day, I had not known how her and my mom looked so alike, almost unrecognizable from each other. I still carry that occurrence with me to this day. I'm convinced I seen my aunt, but also wonder at times many questions to why or how I seen her. Was the glow to her figure a good sign? Has she made it to the afterlife? I thought once a spirit made it to the light, they were no longer able to walk this earth. At least my prior knowledge from books and movies and TV shows. I have many questions. At the same time, I think it's for the better good for them to be unanswered. Have you ever experienced an angel or a spirit in general? Was it a good or bad? Do you even believe in spirits and ghosts? Okay, everybody, that is the ending of today's ghost stories. I hope y'all enjoyed this little collection. To me, they were very heartwarming and heartfelt. Goosebumps reading them, I can tell you that, because I have had people visit me as well after they have passed, and it's so real. But I will see y'all tomorrow, Thursday. But until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy y'all, it's Curious Raven. This is a Appalachian horror story. I am putting this on Curious Raven's Thoughts segment. It is number 7. It is more of me telling the story, not really giving much advice, and just kind of talking about it after. It is by No Preparation 1870 and is called Appalachian Horror. I figured the best way to start this is by stating that this is a series of events that I have experienced throughout my 27 years of life in the Appalachian region of the rural Southwest Virginia. Some have just been feelings, while others have left me unstable to be outside after dark, which, as many of you may know, is something that you never do when you live as deep in the mountains as I do. First, I will go back as far as I can remember to when we had just started living in the house we still currently live in. In the grand scheme of things, our house really isn't all that old. If I remember, it was built somewhere around the 60s to 70s, so really not that old. When my grandparents bought the house and we moved in was when the experiences started happening. They weren't bad experiences, don't get me wrong. Mainly things being moved, shadows out of the corner of the eye, strange smells and sounds, but nothing I would call bad, just strange. My mother and father had moved a trailer onto my grandparents' property at that time as well, and my mother, unlike my granny and myself, is very much a skeptic. I vaguely remember her always brushing off Granny, telling her about the strange smells and other things happening around the house, until one day she was by herself at the trailer. My brother and I were at school, Granny was at work, and my pawpaw was most likely in his recliner at the house. Something to know about where the trailer sat at the time and the land we own. We own a few acres of land with a creek running about halfway through it, splitting the land that we lived and worked on from the land that was almost entirely mountainside. The trailer was sat at the very edge of the property by the creek. There was about half an acre of land between the house and the trailer, and my mother, who was home alone, started smelling a man's aftershave. Could potentially mark that up to my father, except my father didn't wear anything like that when he was alive. Not that he didn't like it, that stuff just never smelled good to him. Granny always said that smell goods always rotted on your daddy, even as a baby. So it wasn't my father. My pawpaw was in the house at the other end of the property, and she just couldn't figure out where this clove-like smell was coming from. Things went on like that for a long time. Objects being moved, the smell of a man's aftershave, all of it. Finally, and I don't know what prompted it, my grandparents decided to get the house wiring checked out. Turns out that the house had been wired with the same kind of wires that were used in coal mines, and a lot, if not most, of the wires were bad. Strangely, once the wiring was fixed, all the strange happenings in the house and property stopped. Granny still says to this day that the previous owner was looking out for us. Now, we're going to skip forward a few years. By this time, my mother has divorced my father, given up custody of me and my brother to our grandparents. I'm still at the age where playing outside in the dirt and creek is the most fun of a southern child can have, and I have made myself a little place across the creek and a little thicket to play in. It was a good quiet place for a child to play, and was good for a while. There's always a feeling that comes with being watched, different feelings to being watched, and this feeling I got, even as a child, was not a welcoming nor friendly sort of watching. I never found out what it was, nor have I gone back to that little spot I used to play in. Even approaching the area I used to play in gives me such a sense of dread and apprehension that I have never been able to shake. A few years later, my brother and I are living with my mother and her new husband. A mistake now that I look back on, but that's not post for here. I wanted to decorate my new room. So we went to the local flea market where I bought a clock and a painting to hang up in my room. Now, before these items entered the house, it was just a normal house. Afterwards, doors opening on their own, items being moved, my cat refusing to leave my side, my things gone missing, only to show up in the other rooms, sleep paralysis, tall dark shadow moving in the corner of my eye, voices. It was awful, and a time in my life I never want to revisit. I distinctly remember laying in bed with the cat. My light was on. I had my CD player blaring music, the usual teen things, when out of nowhere, it felt like something kicked the edge of my bed. I'm not talking a light kick, like something trying to get my attention. I'm talking hard enough to scoot my bed several inches to the side. There were nights when I'd be laying in bed, my door cracked, 'cause of course I had the room with no windows, and I have always had a slight fear at pitch black. I'd be laying there on my side, so my face was facing the door. Now, something to know about me is that I have awful vision. Without my glasses, I can only see clearly a few inches in front of my face. This doesn't mean, however, that I can't see movement. I believe that it is far more terrifying to only be able to see a dark blur moving towards you than to clearly see what the blur is. We didn't stay long in that house and was forced to move not long after, and during the move, I was forced to leave the clock behind, and oddly enough, the strange happening stopped. Now, we skip a bit more forward in time. I'm an adult now, and I've had more experiences now that I'm back in my hometown in the heart of the Appalachian Mountains. Everything from hearing a woman outside in the middle of the night in January calling, "Hello?" over and over, to being outside at night smoking and getting the overwhelming feeling that I didn't get inside immediately that something would attack me, to the crickets outside going quiet, and the fear of turning around to look out the window for fear of what may be looking in. But that's all from my experiences. Long-winded, I am sure, and there are some things I have left out. I am at work and don't have time to write more than I have, but I hope some of y'all have enjoyed my retelling of my life experiences. That is the end of the story. I do have some input to give or some thoughts. Yes, I do believe that the prior owners were trying to give your grandparents a heads up, because sometimes when we just randomly get a thought in our mind, it might not be ours. It might be our ancestors or a spirit trying to talk to us. And them just randomly checking the wire one day, and then they do, and then everything stops. That just means that they put that thought in their head because they knew that something bad was going to happen. It could have caused a fire or something in the house. And the spirits were trying to give you a warning. And they listened to it, and they replaced it, and then the spirits moved on. It's amazing. Bringing old things inside your house, everything has energy attached to it. So when you own something for a long time and you donate it, it will always have your energy left on it or the previous person's energy on it. And if you lived in a house that was riddled with any type of negativity, you will have a negativity attached to that item. And also spirits. When they feel comfortable with something after they pass away, they will attach to certain items. And so you're bringing in a spirit into your home. That's why when I go to any type of secondhand shop, I'll always hold what I would like to buy in my hand for a little while and see if I get any weird vibes from it. If I do, I'll put it back. I remember recently I bought this really cute police figurine because we're a law enforcement family, and it was the ceramic police figurines, and they felt okay. But then when I got them home, I just felt a really off feeling about the energy that was coming off of them. And I literally took them back and redonated them. I didn't want to give them away because they were like collectibles, but I just had a weird off vibe about them and got rid of them just in case. And now when I look over in the place that they were, I don't feel that bad feeling anymore. So I think something kind of negative was attached to them or something. But that was my experience. But I hope y'all enjoyed that story. I will see y'all tomorrow on Saturday for Creepypasta Saturday. I love y'all very much. But until then, remember it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy, y'all. It's Curious Raven. I hope y'all have had a good weekend. Today we have some haunted house stories for you. Number 1. I live with 24 people in a co-op house. Our house is a historic mansion built in 1854. We have an expansion unfurnished basement. In one corner of the room, it is used as a maintenance room. It is the most darkest room in our house. I hang out down there a lot, 99% of the time alone. I do work in restorative glazing, where I repair and restore windows of historic value. The oldest ones I have done are 180 years old. I'm in the middle of giving the room a huge makeover. I am reorganizing, purging a bunch of things, and have moved out 2 huge metal cabinets, a 4-tier wall shelf, as well as I have moved those 2 tables. This is important later. I have recognized down there the presence of spirits, but I've never felt it so intensely, like that I have felt actually disturbed. It's more like something in the background, and I'm conscious of it, but I just shrug. It's like I just coexist with the energies. I always work down there alone and have never felt afraid of anything. The work I do is out of love for keeping the windows crafted by the carpenters of their time alive. And I think that's why, despite how much I am disturbing their environment, I'm alright in their book. Parenthetically, I did rent a place once where I lived with spirits, and the energy was very intense, which is a different story entirely. But on my move-out date, I asked the homeowner about it, and he confirmed with me 2 specific ghosts that live there with many stories. It was the first time I felt the presence of spirits. With the mansion, I do not feel the presence of anything of the other world, anywhere else but a suite on the 3rd floor, which I had actually been intent on believing is cursed. Come to find out and learn that there have been multiple suicides in the suite that were spaced 30 years apart. This is just my experience in recognizing the presence of spirits. In the few times I have felt them, I have not been wrong. Many other people are on this sub I see have that too. Like, I realize this basement room is really creepy in the traditional sense, and I don't want this to come off as I only think it's inhabited by spirits, because it is just creepy in the traditional sense. I sincerely feel them there, but I've never been actually creeped out by anything. That was until tonight. So 2 things. As I mentioned, I moved a lot of stuff around. I made a lot of noise, a lot of banging, a ton of ruckus, giving this room makeover 2 straight days, and I'm not even done. I was in the middle of taking a break from heaving and throwing shit around, sitting down and writing a draft for the workshop I teach, when all of a sudden I felt this feeling of absolute dread, like so intense. Like I was being watched by somebody I'd really pissed off, and they were standing right behind me. It really shook me so badly I panicked, grabbed my things, and bolted all the way out the basement. See that little door there that is opened? Before now, it was obstructed by a shelving unit, so it stayed shut. It gets hot as hell in the basement because the boiler is right there. And that small door opens up to a drafty crawl space that lets in a little bit of air. So I've been keeping the door open. Before now, it's always stayed shut. So it is possible I pissed off one of the basement spirits by being so loud. Or maybe as a new, more bitter spirit has wandered in through the space I opened. I didn't know the latter was possible until I was doing some research earlier. How can I calm them down there? I need to work down there, but I am so shaken right now to go down there. But I need to get some work done. I seriously have never felt this way when I've been down there, and I spend a lot of time in that room. It's really inconvenient. How do I fix this? Number 2. 3 years ago, I was alone at home. My parents were out shopping, and I was watching videos on YouTube. That day, around 11 a.m., I heard something fall in the hallway. I look and notice that it's medicine. My parents arrive and I ask them where the medicine was. They tell me it was in the medicine cupboard, which was half open, that it was in the back of one of the floors behind some medicines. It was summer, there was no wind, and even fewer windows open. A week later, alone again for same reason watching YouTube, I hear a door slam on the floor above. Because yes, I was on the ground floor. My dog who was with me ran into my room, maybe out of fear, which he never does. Then I hear a switch go wrong, and then another door, and another, and it wouldn't stop. About 15 minutes later, things calmed down. My dog sticks his head out of the room, looks left, right, and then goes back into the bedroom. Weird. And it starts again. The doors and the switches, the intense stress of my dog and me. And after a few minutes, which seemed like an eternity, nothing. I call my father petrified, who tells me to go upstairs and see if a window is open. My dog sticks his head out, looks around, then leaves. I go out too. I go upstairs. No windows open and no lights on. The doors, for their part, were haphazard, even though they were all closed at the base. On the day of this event, I was 11 years old. And if you have any rational explanations, I'm all ears. Number 3. So me and my family, my mom, stepfather, and sister, live in a new build, meaning we are first owners and been living here for some while. Even though there have been times where I felt watched or a presence somehow when I was home alone, I shrugged it off as normal. But whenever I'm chilling in our living room and home alone, I suddenly hear sort of thud from the other side of the house from an unused room where my nephew sleeps when they come over. Nothing too serious. I thought until recently when I was eating in the dinner room and my stepfather was on the couch in the living room and my mother in the kitchen finishing food. I forgot to mention, there was half of a watermelon on our counter with a knife in it. Suddenly I just see a hole and the knife from the watermelon literally is thrown into the middle of the kitchen at least 2 meters away. Nobody even touched the watermelon and the knife was stabbed into it. So I don't think the wind could have thrown a knife out of a watermelon, especially due to the weight of the knife, and that was pretty unexplainable for me. Since that event, whenever I go past a certain point in our hallway, I feel uncomfortable and watched. Can someone explain what could have caused the knife to fly out like that? Number 4. When we bought the townhouse 9 years ago, we called it Lucky Number 13 in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. It was a bargain. We found a beautiful black cat around the neighborhood and called her Mama Cat. One day my mom was talking to one of the neighbors who shared a bit of history about the place. The first owner was a woman named Grace, who was savagely murdered in this townhouse. The realtor didn't disclose the information to us. Her murder is unresolved. I believe her story was aired on Unsolved Mysteries of Grace Stinson. I also found out that the other people who leased or owned the property have problems. I'm not sure if they were paranormal, but they were all subjected to unfortunate events. I am not sensitive to spirits, but my sister is. She felt Grace's presence, but also something menacing. We had the home blessed and cleansed it often. My relationship with my sister deteriorated while we both lived there. We both had mental health issues and substance abuse issues. I'm not sure if this home had anything to do with these problems. We were very opposite in our personalities. Is there anything else you can recommend me to do to help this townhouse find peace? My sister just moved out, and now it's my turn to try to find some happiness there. I don't have the financial support my sister does. I'm disabled and live on $1,050 a month. I'm going to have it appraised when I get there. I feel like I should tell the realtor about the murder. Another problem is that my sister has caused a lot of damage to the third floor, which was all hers. It needs to be completely redone, so that will also lower the value. I can go into many details, but I'm hoping to find a way to stay there. I still love it a lot. Thank you for reading this. I know it was a long post. P.S. I still get mail for Grace. Number 5. I have been seeing a ghost around my house for the past week. He's around 6 foot tall and wears a yellow shirt, red flannel, black jacket, and black pants. His face is devoid of features and has only eyes and a large mouth. His skin is black and opaque. I see him around 5 times a day staring at me with a blank expression. I am scared, and I don't know what to do about it. My method of getting rid of him is just crying until he goes away. My boyfriend cannot see him, and the man disappeared when he walked into him. I notice it's the same colors as shown on the German flag. My boyfriend is German, so maybe that has significance? I would like information on this, please. If you can respond with assistance, that would be nice. I don't believe he is attached to the room. I have seen him outside at a nearby pond. Also, he has walked up to me before. Thank you. I will respond to this one. It sounds like this ghost might be attached to your boyfriend if you only started seeing him after you started living with your boyfriend. Talk to your boyfriend about it and see if he was in any places he could pick the ghost up from. Has he messed with any Ouija boards or anything like that? Has he ever gone ghost hunting? Just kind of fill it out and talk to him about it. Just tell the ghost that he is not welcome there and that he needs to stop showing you himself because it is not nice and it scares you and he needs to go away. And you need to be firm about it. And if he still doesn't go away, say, I understand that we can live in harmonious together, but you need to stop walking up to me and staring at me like that every day. Just put your foot down. You can cleanse your house with sage. Just look up how to do it online. But you have to have real intentions towards it. You have to believe in it. You have to do it. And I hope that helps. You could also wear some black tourmaline or onyx or, a type of stone. I have them in my rings and my necklaces. And they just ward off evil spirits. And they help protect you a little bit. They help protect your energy. Those are my recommendations. And you can start by trying that. I hope that helps. Alright, y'all, that is the end of the stories for today. I love y'all so much. I will see y'all next week. But until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Hey y'all, it's Curious Raven. I have one story for y'all today. It's a little bit longer. Let's get into it. It is by Carweed Ghost. And it's called My Experiences. Didn't realize they were ghosts till I lost 90% of my vision. When I was 4 or 5, traveling across the country, I saw a beautiful long blonde hair woman in a long sleeve dress with tiny flowers printed standing in the middle of a flat golden plain with the wind blowing her hair and dress. And I knew she had died by a wildfire soon after. I still remember the image. And thought later, maybe reincarnation memory? 9 years old, Air Force brat, we visited Turkey. There was a tunnel leading up to the Colosseum grounds from the cages and prison cells below. And I saw a woman in a traditional biblical garb with a blue shawl over her hair, bent over with her hands on the wall for support, blinking up into the sunlight. I had the overwhelming urge to touch the wall where her hand had been. Just my imagination. Years go by and I am diagnosed with an incurable eye disease. My sister and I go on a road trip for historical sites while I still can. And then I knew this was a ghost energy. Shiloh National Cemetery Park walking around, I saw a copse of trees with one Confederate marker among Union markers. I wondered how he got there. Suddenly in my mind's eye, I saw a very young slim man with a dark hair stumble out of the dense brush and be confronted by the sight of Union men sitting around a fire. Imagination again. Later, my sister and I were standing at the dedication plaque podium, and my sister said how sad this place made her feel. Suddenly, I felt a sense of pride and said how proud that their sacrifice was being honored. then felt joy and laughed and tried to shoulder bump the Confederate ghost I knew, could not see, standing beside me. Sight deteriorated fast, facial recognition gone. It's a blurry world. By the way, I can only type on my phone close to my face. Black screen, white lettering. Allen, Texas, standing outside grocery store, waiting on my ride. I look up, and not 2 feet from me is an older gentleman with full head of gray hair and bushy mustache, smiling and staring at me, not saying a word. At the time, I didn't wonder how I could see him so clearly. Minutes go by, silence. I'm wondering if he is just standing there judging me, my attire, etc. I turn my back on him and ignore him. Thought no more about it until 2 years later, living in Texas. Again, outside waiting for my ride. He's there, 2 feet from me, silent and smiling at me. 75-mile distance from the last time I saw him. That's when I realized I can see him as I did in Allen because I recognized him from Allen. Remember, facial recognition is gone. I can't even see myself in the mirror. That shocked me. I don't know him. I walked away. Now you're going to say I'm crazy or hallucinating. 4 years later, I'm living in Kentucky, and I visit an Amish store as I am waiting in line at the cashier. And I see an Amish couple in traditional garb standing perfectly still staring at me. I see her clearly with her bonnet and long dark green dress, slim, with hard lines on her face, wrinkles. She barely comes to her husband's shoulders. I look at the line, I look at him, and see his white shirt and red suspenders. But there is a black blob that covers his face and part of his shoulder. Okay, I think. Blind spot from my eyesight, not wondering why I can see her so clearly. Turn to look at the cashier, and I can see her plump, blonde, middle-aged with glasses smiling at me, and suddenly think she is connected to the couple. Then memory lapse until I found myself with a receipt in my hand saying it will be okay, to a crying cashier who won't look up at me. Last experience was December 5th, 2023, a weekend getaway with my sister and her daughter-in-law. Nashville, Tennessee, Broadway Street bar hopping. I had slowed down drinking and had switched to water as we walked into Blake's place. Daughter-in-law was very drunk and got nose to nose with a bouncer. Suddenly, I felt such pride for the bouncer and could see him and daughter-in-law clearly. He stood there stoic and unresponsive to daughter-in-law, barrage of drunk BS till she gave up and moved on. He had a black stocking cap and a heavy coat and gloves on. Roundish face, but not fat, small nose and thin lips. I went to the back of the dance floor and planted myself there so my sister would know where I was and listened and enjoyed the band with my water. To the right of me I saw, as if in a spotlight, a tall blonde man in a red, short-sleeved t-shirt and huge biceps standing there just staring at me, not drinking or moving to the music as the blurry guys behind him were. Song after song, he just stood there watching me. I felt a little self-conscious. I am now 60, so what the hell? Eventually my sister came to tell me it was time to leave to get daughter-in-law to hotel. Memory lapse, not drunk, had been on water. Don't remember anything until we were outside on the sidewalk when the bouncer came running out to me, grabbed my arm with a shocked expression on his face and demanded, "What did you just say to me? What did you just say to me?" "I don't know," I cheaply said. "Best band?" And he stood back and watched us as we moved on down the road. I believe the red shirt with a ghost connected to him and said something to him through me. Unlike Shiloh, like Amish store, I don't know what the message was. If I hadn't affected these two people the way I had, I would think I had hallucinations or a very vivid imagination. But seeing the stoic bouncer so shook up convinced me, and I am trying to find explanation validation, that I am not crazy. That I do not think you are. I see ghosts. I don't see them all the time, just sometimes. It's like maybe once to twice a year, I'll see them really in detail. And then sometimes they'll talk to me through my mind. I can hear them and we talk to each other. But it only happens for like a couple of seconds. It's not like I'm just chilling and sitting and talking with a ghost, but all the other days I'll see the black little shadows, go around the corners and out the corner of my eye and all of that. So I know they're around me. It's just I don't know why I only see some of them. But I believe you. Most definitely you have a gift. A gift. And I think these ghosts are speaking through you. That's amazing. It almost makes me think of like a shaman. So maybe you should kind of check that out. I usually wasn't going to say what I thought, but I just had to chime in because this is amazing. And don't let your gifts go to waste. Alright, everyone, that is it. That's the end of the story. I will see y'all again this coming week. I love y'all so much. But until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy, y'all. It's Curious Raven here on this creepy pasta Saturday. I have a story for you. It is by Late But Still Early One. It is called I'm a Transport Driver for Serial Killers. This drive made me quit. To clarify, I worked for the state, driving a white van that transported police officers along with dangerous apprehended criminals from the station to a high-security prison. These criminals included serial killers, sex offenders, and other such abominations. The van had 8 seats in total, 2 at the front, separated from 6 at the back by a thick transport plastic panel for driver protection. I was never specifically told the crimes they have committed, but the drive could be over an hour long, which meant I often had enough to gauge from their conversations and ramblings. Some would yell and try to fight the police or escape during the ride, but the van was built rock solid to account for those types. Some were child abusers, molesters, remorseless killers who gloated about their sins. Others would beg the police to let them go. I was disgusted by these people, but never disturbed to the point of wanting to quit. After 10 years on the job, nothing fazed me anymore. In fact, I was proud of what I did. The more horrific the person, the more I liked the idea of sending them off to get what they deserved. That was until one day, when a calm, well-groomed young man was apprehended and brought to the van. 4 police officers accompanied him. He was dressed in a tailored blue suit and had shiny brown slicked back hair. Couldn't have been older than 30. First, I mistook him as a manager or lawyer from a distance, before noticing he had both hands behind his back. He nodded politely as he passed my window and was taken to the back. They unfolded the seats and sat down, and the door was slammed shut. I started the engine. This ride's an hour and a bit. You're not going to give us any trouble, are you, son? Asked one of the officers. Course not. You guys don't get paid nearly enough for that, said the man in the suit. A few of the policemen scoffed. You're right on that one, another officer said, rolling his eyes. My uncle used to be a cop. Ironic, I know. The man in the suit replied nonchalantly, still handcuffed. But when he started, there were 50 in his division. Now there's about 10. Makes you wonder if all the tax money is going to the nuclear warheads instead. Wouldn't be surprised, one officer mumbled to another, shaking his head. My lawyer told me not to say that because it might piss you off, but I told him you'd all let me go as soon as you heard it. The policeman gawked, the entire van erupting with laughter. I wondered what was so funny. Whatever crime he had committed, this man was bantering without a care. While being deported to face life in prison or possibly the death penalty, he cracked a few more jokes, and they were wrapped around his little finger. A while later, he caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "You must hear all sorts of crazy stories," said the suited man talking directly to me. "Imagine being an Uber driver, but all the passengers kill people. I'd watch that reality show," he continued. "Still, it must be satisfying in a weird sort of way, bringing them all to justice, literally." "Yeah, sick people like you," I replied. He stared at me through the mirror. I felt a chill out of nowhere. My blood ran cold, and I instantly regretted opening my mouth. Sick people like me? There was a silence for a few seconds. Cops looked at each other awkwardly. I kept quiet. "Well, cheers to you on behalf of all the sick people like me, then," he finally said. I couldn't tell if he was being sarcastic. "I mean it. If it weren't for you, we'd all have to walk to prison. Wouldn't want to drop the soap after that hike." "He must be fun at parties," Cop smirked. I realized the cop was referring to me. They all laughed again. For the rest of the journey, they talked about politics, stories about other prisoners, and how early they could leave for work. They had an odd chemistry with him. The policemen acted very differently to how they usually did. They usually tried to bully the criminals or scare them into a confession. On the contrary, this time, it almost seemed like they were all at a big dinner party, and I wasn't invited. Perhaps they were getting some entertainment while they could. Or they were intimidated by him and didn't want to admit it, I thought. Some serial killers were notorious for being charming after all. Everyone's heard of Ted Bundy. I realized that even after all that chat, I still had no idea what crime he had committed. When we arrived, I opened the back doors for them to get out. "Thanks for the lift. Drive safe," he grinned at me. And they took him away to the prison. The nerve, I thought. I got back in the driver's seat. About a week later, between shifts, and I decided to break at a cafe in the parking lot. I walked inside and joined the K, eyeing a big latte. As I glanced to the side, my heart skipped a beat. A man was wearing a blue suit, which looked exactly like the one that the criminal with the slicked back hair was wearing. I blinked. This man had an afro and was reading a newspaper. Same suit, perhaps? Obviously not the same guy. I exhaled with relief. I ordered my latte and sat down at a table, sipping it slowly. The man in the blue suit sat by the window, still reading the paper. I glanced at him for a while and noticed that he was just staring into it without turning the pages. As I stood up to leave, he folded the newspaper and looked up towards me. His lips stretched into a wide, menacing smile, and he dragged his finger across his neck as he stared at me with wide eyes and tilted his head. We stared at each other for a while in silence, my heart starting to race. Then I looked around frantically, suddenly concerned for my safety. Everyone in the cafe was absorbed into their own world. It seemed like no one else had seen the gesture he had made towards me in a very public space. I rushed out of the cafe, glancing behind me every few steps. Suddenly paranoid, he turned his head to lock eye contact with me, gleeful that his threat was having its intended effect on me. For the next few days, I kept hearing noises, footsteps, scratching, sometimes even the sound of someone breathing behind me. When I turned around, there would always be nothing there. Just as I thought, I was turning schizophrenic. My suspicion that something was out to get me was confirmed again. I was at the grocery store on the weekend, putting vegetables in my cart, as a woman wearing a blue denim jacket and flowery dress was walking towards me. She was pushing a cart with a baby strapped to the seat. "You better watch your back," she whispered as she walked past. That caught me off guard. I whipped my head around and she kept walking without looking behind her. She wasn't talking on the phone, and she wasn't with anyone else apart from the baby. That warning was undoubtedly for me. Had I just pissed off a cult of people dressed in blue? I got in the van the next day at 7 a.m. and headed off to the station. There was heavy traffic, and I was convinced I'd be late for work. I turned into a long stretch of road that was next to a steep drop, the metal railing fencing off the edge on the right as I drove along the congested road, stopping and starting to move a few feet. Incrementally, I stared at the bumper stickers on the back of the white van in the front. It's gonna be a good day. There was a sun with a smiley face next to it. The traffic finally started flowing, and I approached an intersection where cars merged from the left-hand side. A set of traffic lights came just before it. I looked at my watch. Please don't turn red. Please don't turn red, I thought. As if the universe was conspiring against me, the lights turned yellow, and as the van in front of me sped past them, they turned red. Fantastic. I slammed the brakes and looked up. I only saw the van in front for a split second, and suddenly out of nowhere, a massive lorry T-boned it violently from the left. A loud crash combined with a painful crunch stunned me into paralysis. Both vehicles crashed through the railings and went hurtling over the edge of the cliff. The lights turned orange, then green, but I remained unmoving in silence and shaking. There was an empty space in front of me where the van had just been. I could see people through their car windows horrified and calling police. Eventually, I snapped out of it and drove numbly to the side of the road without having fully processed the event. I parked there and called my colleagues at the station to inform them about what had just happened. A few days later, I found out that both drivers had died on impact. The lorry had crashed into the van's driver's side at 90 miles per hour, crushing him instantly. They thought it was a freak accident at first until they recovered the remains and discovered the lorry's driver's phone, which had been in a holder stuck to his windshield. It wasn't GPS on the phone that was guiding him. At the time of the crash, he had been using a navigator app connected to a tracking device. The device had been tracking my vehicle. The police searched my van from top to bottom and found the bugger stuck underside of one of the back seats, the seat that the man in the slick-backed hair wearing the blue suit had sat in. On his ride to prison about 2 weeks ago, I pieced it together as soon as they told me. The motherfucker must have slipped that out from a pocket or something and stuck it to the inside of my van as soon as I pissed him off. Turned out, he was an infamous underground weapons dealer. A lot of people who had their firearms confiscated, most of them for good reason, knew he was the guy that would supply them. So, were absolutely infuriated when he got caught. Apparently, he had a cult-like following among those people, and wearing all blue was their low-key way of supporting him. I don't want to get too political here, so I'll just say that this guy was very well connected, and a lot of people were on his side, even if it was under the radar. And I was their next target. I figured Blue Suit Guy must have somehow communicated to one of his cronies about the tracking device on my white van and told them to get after me. By pure chance, another white van was in front of me at the very moment they decided to strike. They must have mistaken the driver for me, knowing the vehicle was a white van in that approximate location. If those traffic lights hadn't turned red at that exact moment they did, that would have been me. I was supposed to die a horrific death that day. I quit the job. The very afternoon I found out, packed my bags and moved to a new town. Since then, I've moved several times. Paranoia won't leave me. I think it'll stay with me for the rest of my life. Anytime I see someone wearing blue, a wave of terror sweeps over me. The same terror I felt seeing that van in front of me getting pummeled and tumbled over the cliff edge, knowing that should have been me. Previously, I'd always taken pride in the fact that I was a brutally honest guy, but I'm a lot more careful nowadays. And one thing's for sure, when someone makes a joke now, I always laugh. That was the end of the story. It was a very good story. I really like that because I used to transport when I was a correctional officer, and I used to transport serial killers. And I never thought of it that way. That's kind of crazy. But all right, I will see y'all next week. I love y'all so much. Until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe. Howdy y'all, it's Curious Raven here on Saturday with another creepy pasta. This one is by Reflection. It is called I Should Have Just Gone to Walmart. Ugh, Emma, can you get the trunk for me? The dim winter sun was setting over the parking lot, nearly devoid of shoppers at this late hour, aside from a van in one distant corner that had just started backing out of its spot. I set my bag down in the passenger seat and rounded the side of my mom's green Camry, met with her impatient and lightly sweating face. I popped the trunk, allowing her to practically collapse into it with the weight of the groceries. Something burst in one of the bags, prompting her to curse under her breath. I just don't get why you won't stick a quarter in those trolleys over there. You get it back afterwards. Mom, still arranging the bags into a position that would stop them toppling over, on the drive home, looked at me scornfully. The Walmart downtown doesn't make you pay. None of the stores around here do, so why should I? You know, we only come here to Aldi. It's cheaper. I just said you get the quarterback afterwards. It's to make sure people put the trolleys back. I sighed, knowing there was no swaying her. Instead of shooting back with some flimsy reasoning, Mom patted her pockets and swore, "Oh, for goodness sake. I've gone and left my wallet at the till again, haven't I?" Before I could get a word out, she was gone like a rocket, racing against the store closing time. Night's chill descended, raising goose flesh, so I slammed the trunk and hopped back into the passenger seat out of the cold. I sat there praying my mom had the haste to get back soon with the keys and start up the heating. There was something else, though. My heart made itself known with a rising, insistent pulse. Was something wrong? Not this again, I groaned, shutting my eyes and following a basic breathing routine to calm my nerves. The anxiety was bad enough, but the anger I felt at the nonsense panic had always been worse for me. Just stop it. Lasagna's waiting for us at home. It's gonna be so good. I opened my eyes. Had I heard something? No, not heard. Felt. I leaned forward to scan the parking lot. Nothing. Then I jumped back in my seat. There it was again. It was small. So much so I was surprised I'd even noticed it. A light but bone-deep vibration was emanating from somewhere, almost like someone nearby was trying to pull down on a gigantic zipper, one tooth at a time. The comparison should have sounded silly, but my heart continued to pound faster and faster until I was sure beyond a doubt that something bad would happen. Something was wrong. It took me longer than I'd have liked to get out, with the seatbelt clamping as I struggled to unbuckle it. There was no smell in the air. Did it smell before? I couldn't remember. No more cars in the lot, only the Camry. No more noise. Again, the slight vibration in the air. Too low a frequency to determine its source. Enough to sense it was there. I tilted my head, staring up at lumpy clouds that cast shadows on each other. Ah, those clouds. I've always loved how they look until one of the shadows moved. I'm not stupid. Thought it was just a cloud's shadow matching its slow drift across the sky. I squinted. The shadow wasn't being cast on a cloud. It was above, or above them, which made me realize whatever I was seeing, it wasn't a shadow. What happened next is too hard to articulate. I've never seen anything else like it, before or since. The dark mass above the clouds began to sort of extend, beaming down at an angle, like sun rays, but moving at a steady pace, or how water or ink moves up paper, by way of capillary action, a black beam. But it was more than that. I was so absorbed in the spectacle it had fully drawn on me that this thing was getting closer, closer to me. And as it closed in, there was no mistaking it. While it continued to stretch all the way back above the clouds, the outline of it, the cross-section, was almost human-shaped. Arms, head, body, and legs, but the limbs end dunted nubs like a stick figure. By the time it stopped, a good 3-4 stories above, I still hadn't moved. I couldn't. I could do nothing but watch in disbelief as lights and layers of color began to flash inside the humanish figure, seeming to have parallax as if whatever lay beyond was a space of its own. Amazingly, something managed to distract me for a moment. A flash of light in my peripheral. A phone torch. Emma? Emma? Are you having a stroke or something? I blinked. What? No, I mean, Mom was back, apparently still without her wallet, now scanning the asphalt for any sign of it. Why didn't I hear her coming back? She clicked her tongue. Then stop standing there like an idiot and help me find it. Come on, it's getting late. I did, in fact, keep standing there, glancing between her and the flashing shadow prism above us. I did a double take. Those glary bright, almost offensively colorful layers were speeding up towards the end of the beam, towards me, piling up on themselves to assemble a figure stepping soundlessly out into thin air. Mom kept calling me. I heard her. Couldn't process her words. Everything else was secondary to the figure above us. It has fully formed, cloaked in a coarse-looking gown, with skin so pale and shadeless. It was as if it radiated a faint glow. The sound of rapid footsteps brought me back to myself. I looked down just in time to see my mom's face painted in a teetering mixture of worry and annoyance. She went to speak, but I held up a hand and pointed to the figure. Squinting at me, she looked to where I was pointing and froze. The whole time, I'd secretly been hoping I was hallucinating. She saw it too. She saw something at least, and that was enough to confirm what I'd been dreading. "Who is that?" she asked. Her voice sounded so small and dry. If I could have spoken, I'd have asked, "What is that?" instead. I watched on in terror as the figure began to slow descent straight down. The closer it drew, the more of it I could make out. There were these iridescent lines floating across the surface of its skin, moving like sun patterns to the bottom of a swimming pool, like the silhouette it had emerged from. It had no hands or feet, just round nubs, although those on its arms had the same light depression on the center. "Car! The car!" "Mom, the car. Get in the car now!" I whispered. No response. I reached out, grabbing her by the arm and shaking her. She was absolutely rigid. One of us had to move. I imagined we were both hoping the other would do so. A second figure emerged from the prism, identical to the first, except it was wearing a plain t-shirt and shorts. At the same time, the first one finally touched down to the asphalt and stood, tilting its head up, apparently waiting for the other to arrive. If I had any lingering doubt that these weren't human, it was squashed when I saw their faces, or lack of thereof. I couldn't see any ears, and where a face should have been was only a circular metal grate, maybe gold or brass. The four of us stood there, still and silent. They stared at us, and we stared right back, completely lost in the foreign sight of the beings. A breath. Then they turned to each other. I don't know if I expected them to talk, but they didn't. Not in any language I know. Faint at first, getting brighter with every pulse, constellations began to flash behind the metal face grates of each of them. I heard nothing aside from a few damp vibrations, yet somehow I knew there was a conversation going on. Very slowly, I took a step back and reached an arm behind me to feel for the car. All the while my eyes stayed locked on the beams. I kept reaching further and further. My fingers brushed nothing but air. One of them abruptly turned and looked at me or at my mom. I couldn't tell. My chest tightened. This wasn't happening. It raised one stunted arm to point at my mom, releasing another cascade of flashing lights behind its girl face. The other crossed its arms and looked over too, like it was waiting for something. I had to risk it. I pivoted, throwing a glance over my shoulder. The car was 20, maybe 25 feet away. I didn't remember wandering that far from it. I noticed something else then. The trees, the grass, and all the greenery surrounding the parking lot was gone. It gave me the impression of a plant that had never evolved life, or where all life was extinct. There was only bare, dark soil enclosing the lot. Seconds before I went for the car, Mom let out a scream, one that I still hear from time to time in my dreams and background noise. I spun around to see the first being, the one wearing a gown, gliding across the ground with an arm outstretched. Mom didn't have the time to move. It came to a dead stop before her, arm still raised, and I saw something emerging from the small depression at the end of its stump. What I now understood was a hole. Whatever came out was darker than the night sky, and I couldn't place its shape, but it looked like it was made out of a mass of ever-shifting black crystals. Mom screamed again. It was more of a gasp, actually. A gasp that lasted barely a second before a bubble broke free of a shifting appendage and fixed itself over her mouth, silencing her. Another four floated down to her wrist and ankles, binding her in place and stopping her from moving as one broke off from the being. It looked like an arrowhead or some other sharp triangular tool, a razor edge cutting through the air and hovering just over her stomach. I understood the danger then, not for me but her. Abandoning caution, I leapt forward yelling, "Get away from her!" But I rolled my ankle and went crashing down onto the cold, hard asphalt. Dazed, I tried to lift myself, and managed to look up at the beings with blood pouring from my nose and cut on my cheek. The one in front of my mom barely seemed to notice me. Give me a quick look, then getting back to the matter at hand, whatever that was. Mom squirmed against her restraints, issuing muffled groans through her nose. I forced my limbs to work, but I was held fast. Mounds of that shifting black crystal had smothered my hands, binding them to the ground. I looked at my mom helpless, terrified. She met my eyes, blinked away a tear, and squeezed her eyelids shut. At the back, the being wearing a t-shirt made some kind of gesture, like it was impatient, and the robe being nodded. Turning back to my mom and directing the arrow-shaped object. At the same time, her blouse began to lift up and off of her, pulled by an invisible force exposing her belly. The being hesitated for a second, and I felt a spark of hope that it might show mercy. But of course it didn't. The dark arrowhead passed into her skin, slicing through layers like butter and dragging a line downwards, leaving a clean incision. Wasting no time, the being reached inside, fiddled around for a moment, then pulled out the severed end of my mom's intestine. Blood and shit splattered the ground, trailing away from her as the being floated backwards, keeping hold of her organ until it was stretched to its full length. I tasted vile. "Stop, you fucks, you fucking..." A gush of vomit interrupted me, flooding out onto the ground, mixing in the intestinal fluids to create a disgusting speckled pattern, which prompted another wave of vomit from me and tears to cloud my vision. "Oh, please!" I wiped my sleeve over my eyes so I could see. The being in the t-shirt had a long pole-shaped protrusion stretching out from the end of its arm, extending to match the length of my mom's intestines. It studied something for a second, before shrugging and nodding at the rogue being. In the blink of an eye, the intestines retracted back like a frightened snake and piled back inside my mom's body. I just stared, not able to understand. The sides of the incision pulled into each other and appeared to heal completely in a matter of seconds. As soon as I processed this, I felt my restraint slacken, then disappear entirely. I shot to my feet, nearly tripping over again, and grasped onto my mom's arm. I pulled under the assumption that she had been released. She wasn't. Why weren't they letting her go? Freezing up, I cranked my head to look at the beings. More flashing lights. The one in a t-shirt was handing something over to the other, but I couldn't see anything passing between them. Maybe it was something invisible, or something my mind just wasn't built to perceive. I continued to tug mechanically, trying to free her. Her skin was cold and slick, and she was shivering. It did no good. The black crystal held fast, but nearly collapsed in relief and shock when the robed figure began to ascend back up to the prism it had come from. The other grabbed onto its gown, communicating something. The robed being dropped back down, but threw its arms out. To what I guessed was frustration, T-shirt gestured towards us again, still conversing with the other, waving its arms around. Still, the robed figure seemed to come and slide across the ground towards us again. Lights continued to flash behind its girl face, all varying shades of orange and red, like it was angry. I couldn't let it happen again, and lunged at it, planning to do, I don't really know. I just wanted to protect my mom. Right as I made contact with the being, I felt a shift in the air. The fluid in my eyes swirled, it made me dizzy. When my eyes stopped rolling to the side, I realized I was being held still by two pale, stunted arms with odd patches of hot and cold traveling around on its skin. Somehow I wound up in the arms of the being wearing a t-shirt, and those arms held me tighter and tighter than any living thing should be able to. "Get the fuck off of me," I screamed, flailing and lashing out in a desperate bet to escape. I tried to bite down on one of its arms. It felt like I'd been curb stomped, like I'd bitten down full force on granite. I kinda gave up after that. It just hurt too much to think. Instead, I took my surroundings where I was again. Mom! Mom! The robed being was standing in the way of her, but it was doing something. I couldn't see what. By the way, my mom was squealing behind her gag. It made the first procedure sound like a pillow fight. I just cried. There was no avenue for relief except the tears. Then everything went quiet. Mom trailed off into a whine, and then nothing. No wind, no trees, or leaves rustling. Behind, they'd all vanished. Just me, my mom, and these things. The one holding me loosened its grip, and I gasped, gulping down stagnant air, floated over to where Mom was, and robed being stepped aside, finally letting me see what was happening. I didn't really want to know. I really didn't. My muscles was locked into place. In one hand, the robe being held one end of the artery it had pulled out of my mom's chest. Without warning, the two entities shot up into the air, coming to halt somewhere above. As they moved, more blood vessels phased through the skin of my mom's body, contorting and straightening to fuse at their ends, forming an unholy, pulsely rope. With speed faster than I could process, the beings flew away, vanishing into the night while clutching the single fused vessel of veins, arteries, and capillaries. There was blood, yes, but only a little. It all seemed to be contained in that one tube they continued to pull along through the atmosphere. From the opposite direction they passed once. I saw them pass over one more time and disappear into the distance before the meaty vessel pulled taut. At the time, I hadn't really pieced it together. I think they'd looped around the entire planet. Not once, but twice, and then some. In what couldn't have been more than 10 seconds. I blinked, and they were back, standing in the parking lot and flashing their lights at each other. I didn't have the energy to whisper and protest. T-shirt looked reluctant in some way and handed over more of something I couldn't see to the robed entity. As they did this, the red stream they'd made from my mom's blood vessels pulled back by itself at impossible speed, retracting out over 2 loops of planet Earth and back into my mom's, breaking apart, phasing back inside, and resembling into their proper structure. That's what I'd guessed anyways. Glassy-eyed and so pale, the crystalline restraints dissolved and my mom slumped limp to the ground. I stood motionless for a second before realizing my own restraints were gone as well, and bolted over to her. I was whispering something. Assurances, maybe apologies, I can't remember. The two beings watched us, Then they ascended back up to the dark prism and out of sight. It began to pull back up into the sky, and when I blinked, all the trees and the grass were back. It all felt normal, almost normal. The only change was that the sky was a little darker, and my mom felt a little colder. Then a lot colder. I placed 2 fingers on her neck. There was no pulse. When the paramedics arrived, they rushed over to us. Their movements were frantic but controlled. Just 30 seconds later, the urgent energy was gone, replaced by a dull rhythm that told me all I needed to know. She was pronounced dead on scene. The coroner later concluded that my mom had simply died. No cause could be found, but brain damage signified a level of hypoxia. I guess that's what happens when your blood is outside of you, even if it's just for a minute. Strangely, I found my anxiety to diminish after that night. It still flares up now and then, but most of the time, there's just this hollow feeling in its place. I don't go to Aldi anymore. Seems silly to mull over something like that, but I can't even be near those big parking lots now. Get my groceries delivered. Maybe it sounds like I'm managing. I am. Inside, though, there's a crack that can't be fixed. Can't be filled. It's worn down over time, gotten less jagged and easier to deal with. Things don't really shock me anymore, or at least the shock is dulled. There will be no justice for her, even if I sought it. I doubt we could ever even access whatever plane those beings hail from. Whatever power we think we have, all those things see when they look at us is a world of monkeys, banging stones together, I'm sure of it. In fact, I'm willing to bet on it, as much as they bet on my mom. Wow, that was a interesting story. It was kind of like, all those stories about when people get abducted and then they come back with scars and stuff that they don't know where they came from. It was like that, but we knew what they did. And I really liked it. But it really does suck that her mom died. I don't know, it was weird. But great story. I enjoyed reading it. Alright, y'all. I hope y'all have a good weekend. Love y'all so much. I'll see y'all next week. But until then, remember, it's scary out there. Please like and subscribe.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross